In this video we're going to talk about constants, and so I'm going to go ahead and create a new Java class, public class, constant fun. This is a much more fun type of fun, right? Constant fun versus variable fun. So public static void main string args. Okay, so when I make an assignment, so I'm going to create an integer called number, and I'm going to set it equal to 15 or 14, as the case may be. That's what my fingers typed. So we're going to leave it as 14. So 14. I'm going to go ahead and compile this, save it, and if I run it, it doesn't do anything. But what I've done here is I have set a variable. So I've created this variable and I have set it equal to a constant, right? The opposite of a variable is a constant. And 14 in Java always means 14. We already proved that by saying we can't name a variable 14. That doesn't even make any sense because 14 is a constant. But number in Java can mean many different things. It depends on what I want it to mean. And so I'm creating a variable there that's an integer type, and I can then set it equal to 14, and then a 14 goes out and is sitting in that number, and the 14 itself is a constant. Okay? If I were to do 14.5, this obviously won't work because I'm trying to put a decimal number into an integer type, and I'm getting a possible loss of precision error. But if I were to make this a double instead, then that will also work. 14.5 is also a constant. Okay? I can also create a string sentence, and say this text is constant. When I put text inside these quotation marks, that means that I want it to be taken literally, and the literal text is exactly what I set it to. So if I print this out now, system.out.println, and I print sentence, it's going to print that string of text, or those words, because that's what I set it to. The text is a constant. And Java determines by which type of information it's sensing what type the constant is. And so if it's a 14.5, it's going to sense that it's a double. That is the constant is a double. If it's in quotation marks and is supposed to be printed literally, it'll sense that by the quotation marks. If we have a 14 point without the point at all, then this is going to be an integer, and I'll prove this quickly just by saying let's take and set I'll set this number back to an integer, and then I'm going to take something like 9 divided by 2. So I'm going to set the number equal to 9 divided by 2, and then I'm going to print out whatever's in that number. Now what would we expect? We would expect that the 9 and the 2 in fact, I'm not even going to do this, just to prove my point a little bit better. I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm just going to do it in the print statement itself. So I'm going to take 9 and divide it by 2, and that is going to be what I print out in my print statement. Okay? So if I compile this and run it, what should it be? What would we expect would come out of this? We have a 9 divided, or well, 2 goes into 9 how many times? Well, it goes in 4.5 times, right? Well, if I compile this and run it, what I get is not a 4.5, I get a 4. Well, now wait a second. That's not right. 2 goes into 8 4 times. It doesn't go into 9 4 times. It goes into 9 4.5 times. But Java sensed that this constant was an integer and that this constant was an integer, and it says, oh, okay, I assume he wants the result, or she wants the result in an integer. And so it gives us the result of the integer division, and this can mess us up. And so we're going to talk about arithmetic next. But I just want to prove the point there that Java is picking up on the fact that those are integers. If I, on the other hand, said 9.2 or 9.0 divided by 2.0, it says, oh, okay, those are decimal numbers, so I assume you want the result in a decimal number because these constants are decimal numbers. All right? So those are constants. One last little thing. Sometimes I want to set up a variable as a constant. Blow your mind here. Sometimes I want something like, let's say I have a double that's going to represent the interest rate. And I'm going to set the interest rate equal to, let's say that the interest rate is 5%. Well, we don't put the percentage, but it's 5% is what our interest rate is. If that is going to be our interest rate, and all through our program, we don't want that to change. We don't want it to accidentally get set to something else. Because right now, if somehow and a lot of what we do in programming is protecting ourselves from ourselves. If somehow I accidentally set that variable later on and then I print it out, whatever's in the interest rate, then it's going to print out the 2.5 instead of the 5.0 that I wanted it in there initially. And so to protect ourselves, and not just that, sometimes we want to do this for other reasons, but I can put this keyword on the front that says final. Final double interest rate equals 5.0. When I put this keyword on the front that says final, that means this variable can no longer be changed. And so if I try and compile this program, I'm going to get an error saying you can't assign this variable that, because it's a final value. That means it's not going to change, and so that'll help me, catch my own errors, and this way now it'll print that interest rate will stay constant throughout the program. And so what we call this with the final declaration is something called a named constant. Okay, so we are assigning a variable, but basically the variable name we're assigning is a place to hold it, but it's not going to change anymore because we put that final keyword on there. And so the interest rate remains constant. Now, that becomes kind of a tricky variable, and so convention, again, Java doesn't care about this, but convention out in the industry is when we are creating a named constant, we identify it differently. And so instead of being a normal type of variable, we're going to name this in all capital letters. Okay, and then that means that here, now if I try and compile and run this, I'm going to get an error because it says, I don't know what this variable means. It hasn't been declared. And you say, well, I declared it there. Well, it's not all capital letters, and Java's case sensitive. And so I would need to say here, interest rate. And then the program will work. So convention is if we're using a named constant that we name it with all capital letters. Just like with the class, we name it beginning with a capital letter. The methods, we begin with a lowercase capital letter. Normal variables, we'd name with a lower case letter to begin with. But this looks a lot like interstate every time I look at it now. If it's going to be a named constant, if we're putting this final declaration and saying, I want this word now to mean something constantly throughout the program, then we name it with capital letters to help in our minds differentiate a regular variable from a named constant. All right? Very good. Spencer out.